But I'm starting anyway.
Go do your intro. Say your intro.
Good morning, every follower he has.
Good morning. All right, so we've been talking about the Senate, and guys, everybody knows how this works. Okay, it's a contiguous body. Not all 100 up for election every 6 years. It's a 2-year rotation. Okay. Now, let's go over the qualifications. Wait, before we do that, how are senators elected? Who elects senators? The people. Now, originally, with the Great Compromise, who elected the senators?
The state legislatures.
State legislatures. And now, what amendment changed that? 17. Okay.
It was either the 16.
So, are you like going to prom with?
Yeah, with time.
That was it planned?
It was scripted.
I can't say. He didn't have the best answers, so like that's why.
So, because of the vegan stuff?
It was all
Wait a second. Were you going to prom with the winner, or were you and Ty going?
Well, that was the thing. If I didn't pick him, then I would go with the winner.
Oh, no.
All right. Qualifications to be a senator. How old? Say it. 30. Okay. You got to be 30 years old. Okay. Other qualifications. Do you have to be a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
Yes. Natural born?
No.
How long must you live in the United States?
10 years.
Different than the House.
10 years.
4. 3.
8.
2.
It's going to be more than the Senate.
10.
12.
13. 15. 14.
9.
Someone honestly guess all those numbers and not a single person guessed.
I know.
I said 9. It isn't.
You sure you brought? I said 9.
Is there a specific reason why?
Well, I don't know if there's a specific reason why I'm 9, but a length of time that would be sufficient to people to think that this person was loyal to the United States and so forth. There's one more qualification, and unlike the House members where you have to live in the district, you have to live in the state, okay, that you represent. Unlike Pat Roberts,
Ooh.
who lives in Virginia but represents Kansas. She has an address in Kansas. There's a house in both places, but it's not really his
Do you
house.
know that address?
We're gonna dox.
This was an issue in his last re-election bid, which he won 2 years ago. His opponent brought it up, and of course it was the primary opponent, not the Democrat, because the Democrat didn't really have a chance. Okay, so it was brought up, and you know his kids went to school in Virginia, graduated from high school from Virginia, but he represents Kansas. So anyhow, those are the qualifications. Now let's look at the leadership of the Senate. Okay, so there's no Speaker of the Senate, right? So the most powerful person in the United States Senate is the Senate Majority Leader. Okay, and today that is who? Whom? Mitch McConnell of Kentucky.
What happened?
She put a note asking if she could go to the restroom.
She didn't want to disrupt.
Yes, which she ended up doing anyways. Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. Okay? Now, similarly to the Speaker, he has those same powers. He or she would have the same powers as the Speaker when it comes to referring legislation to committees, choosing which committees bills go to, right? Choosing which committees members sit on of his party, okay? So I would say that the majority leader doesn't have the equivalent power, but is very powerful in the Senate, okay? The most powerful person in the Senate. Okay? Then we're going to talk about a couple other positions that are in the Senate that are not so much powerful, but exist. And that includes the President of the Senate. Who is the President of the Senate?
President Pro Tempore.
The President of the United States Senate.
President of America?
No?
Is he on the sheet?
What?
The vice president?
The Vice President of the United States is the President of the Senate. You guys knew that, didn't you?
I had
No.
So I guess I never told you that story about John Adams, the first Vice President.
No.
Okay, so the Vice President is the President of the Senate. So the first Vice President, John Adams, thought that he had to go attend every Senate meeting and run it. Okay, so you have these 26 senators from the original 13 states, right? And they're like, John, you really have no constitutional role here. Will you please go away? Remember, John Adams is kind of obnoxious and disliked. And so he was obviously put off by this. But really the only role that the Vice President has in the Senate, and he can oversee the Senate whenever he wants, but they rarely do. There's really two roles they have. One, the Vice President can do what? Somebody knows this. Break a tie vote. So if it's 50-50, because it's an even number with senators, right? 100 is an even number, then your tie-breaking vote is the Vice President. And that's the only time he'll vote, is if there's a tie. Does that make sense? Okay? And I believe Mike Pence has had to already vote in the Senate, okay, to break a tie. Because you have some Republicans, a few Republicans that are, not very conservative. So sometimes the Vice President has to come in. Biden, I think, had to get in there a couple times and break ties as well. The other official role of the Vice President is to count the Electoral College votes after the election. Okay? And I think I covered this in the executive branch as well, so don't worry about that. It's good if you're the Vice President and you're running for president and you win. You get to count the votes that you won. If you lose, like Al Gore did, he had to read those Electoral College votes, showing that George Bush won instead of him. I will say this about Al Gore, who I'm not a big fan of. He did it with grace and integrity, even though many in his party felt like he should have won the election, and they said it was robbed. And of course, that's what sore losers do, is they complain about it. So anyhow, I thought he handled it very much with integrity. Anyhow, okay, moving on. See, that's the president. Then you have the Senate President pro tempore. That's Orrin Hatch. Okay? And Orrin Hatch is old. He's been in the Senate a long time. In fact, the Senate President, you want me to write it on the board? The Senate President pro tempore. Right there. Now, this was a position that was created in 1947 with the Presidential Succession Act of 1947. You might remember this from history. What happened was 7 presidents to that point had died in office, and the way the succession used to work, you would go president, vice president, then went to the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Treasury, in the order that the cabinet departments were created. And people said, this isn't really right, because those people in the cabinet aren't elected. So they changed it up, and they put the Speaker of the House after the Vice President, and then they created this kind of ceremonial position which is the longest serving member of the majority party in the Senate. Okay, and today, since the Republicans control the Senate, Orrin Hatch, the longest serving member of the Senate for the Republican Party, is fourth in line to be President of the United States. He's from Utah. And he needs to retire. Yesterday in history class, we talked about Daniel Inouye. Remember that story? The Hawaiian, the Japanese American from Hawaii, and how he had been the Senate President pro tempore before he passed away. So it's a ceremonial position, guys. There's no real power that comes with this, other than being fourth. Okay. In line. All right. Then you're going to get your minority leader. Okay. And that's what? Dick Durbin? Is that Dick Durbin? Oh yeah, Chucky. Yeah. From New York. Durbin's the whip. Durbin the whip.
Majority whip. Yeah.
Minority whip.
Majority.
No, majority.
Should be minority.
So John Cornyn is the majority whip.
Wait a sec. Durbin is a Democrat.
Yeah, you have those minutes.
Yeah.
I was always.
Okay, sorry.
Or is this just because?
Yeah, Durbin is a minority whip, and John Cornyn is the majority. I apologize about that. Made a mistake there.
So just switch it.
Yeah, just switch them. Because the Republicans, yeah. So the minority leader in the Senate, similarly to the minority leader in the House, has the same types of powers. So committee members, what committees members sit on, and so forth. And then the whips have the same role in the Senate as they do in the House, which is, of course, twisting arms and vote counting, knowing all the votes, how many votes you have, and so forth. Okay. I would just like to say, from a personal point of view, that when you look at that sheet of paper with those pictures on it of the leadership of the Democrats and the Republicans in our Congress, I would just like to say that I think that both parties have poor leadership, and they're very willing to lie to the American people, and they're very willing to create animosity towards each other rather than work together. The things they say about each other is pretty ugly. Now, that being said, I take you back to another time when Ronald Reagan was president, and the Speaker of the House was Tip O'Neill, who was a Democrat. Okay, and Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan would say things kind of negative about their opponent, but it was usually about their ideas. It wasn't personal. Okay, and so these two men could sit down and have dinner together, and maybe a cocktail, and laugh about things. They were friends. They disagreed on policy. Okay, it's kind of like the video this morning for the broadcast when they were talking about gun control, and there were comments made in the class, including myself, but then at the end there was the disclaimer, okay, about hey, we ask that you don't pick on somebody because of their opinion, and everybody has a right kind of to share their opinion, okay, whether it's educated or not, and I agree with that. Okay, I seriously agree with that, and I'd hate for somebody to say something mean, because I know some of those kids that were talking, and I would hate for somebody to be a jerk to them over that. And so that's kind of how our political process has turned into this ugliness. Okay, James Comey, the former FBI director, is coming out with a book today. Okay. President Trump was tweeting this morning. In fact, it was 3, when you do a long tweet, it was 3 tweets long. Just lambasting Comey's character, because that's what Comey's going to do in his book, is lambast the president.
That was just this morning?
Yeah. So it's ugly today, and both sides, and it's hard for them to work together when you get personal. Okay. So I'm not impressed with the leadership of either side, personally. All right. So you got leadership, and that's kind of where we end our discussion with the Senate as far as just kind of its structure. All right. We'll get into some of the powers here and roles that they have a little bit more as we move along. Okay. So the next heading for your notes should be the powers of Congress. The powers of Congress. And this, we're going to do some differentiation here. But first, we're going to talk about, their powers are limited. Congress's powers are limited for obvious reasons. You know some of them. They're limited by federalism. Okay. They're limited by checks and balances. Okay. They have the power to make laws, but they don't have the power to enforce them. Now, in the Constitution, Article 1 of the Constitution right here, if it's a power that is written in there, given to Congress, what do we call that power? Expressed. Okay, write that down. We're going to have some carryover from previous chapters here, and I'm going to sneeze. Woo! Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. I warned them. I didn't warn you. Sorry. I don't know where that came from.
It's allergy season.
All right. Some of those express powers include the power to tax. And they can tax your income, which is found in what amendment? Sorry, I didn't hear that? 16th Amendment. Okay.
They got it right.
Now, while we're talking about taxes, it is April. 2 days from now, millions of Americans that are working are panicking about getting their taxes in. Okay, including my wife, because I don't do our taxes. Okay, in fact, well, we have an accountant, but she gets all the stuff for the accountant. All right, so let's just talk about taxes. Can you name a tax? Give me a tax. Okay, you got state income tax.
Federal.
You got federal income tax. Sales tax.
Alcohol tax.
Capital gains, good.
Keep thinking that.
Property tax.
Alcohol tax.
Okay, alcohol taxes are called sin taxes, or otherwise known as excise taxes.
Do I need to know all of these?
Well, it's good to know them because you're paying them.
Okay.
Oh, it's longer.
Ooh, Medicaid, Medicare.
Medicare?
Social Security.
Sometimes there's local. Depends on where you're at.
Unnecessary tax.
Does the place you work for have certain taxes?
Does who?
The place that you work for, don't they have?
No,
They take part of your paycheck for Social Security.
yeah, they take these taxes, a lot of these out of your check.
Isn't
Because
gas?
I recognize one of the box, there was one that they took out.
Isn't that an excise tax?
That's what I
Is that not just a sales tax?
I mean, you could call it that. Now, when you guys get a phone bill on your cell phone bill or your landline, are there some other taxes on there?
I don't look
There's
at
some
that.
other taxes.
Tariffs.
Okay, tariffs, and those are passed on to the consumer. Okay, so I mean, you could put those in there. I don't think I need an I in there.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
3 F's.
3 F's. Okay, there's more.
Bail,
You pay taxes.
Oh, debt
Jail tax.
Death tax.
Oh.
Pay taxes when you die.
That is a thing.
It's not the inheritance tax, it's the death tax. Yeah, it's
Inheritance.
Inheritance.
Bye.
Where? Here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here, it.
That's the only one that's little.
What's that?
All in our capital except for the
Yeah, I know.
Why would you?
Because I made a mistake.
I like it.
I'm owning up to it.
Keep it there.
Okay. All right. So let's say you make let's go $100,000. Okay.
It's a lot of money.
But you're not going to keep all that, are you?
No.
No. Okay. So depending on what state you live in, this could be pretty high, or it could be zero. Texas, Florida.
Let's move to Texas. Oregon question?
Okay. Kansas, it's I think it's around 7%. You get out in California, New York, you're talking over 10%. Okay. Depending on how much money you make. You know what I mean?
And no wonder people don't work.
I mean, Texas.
Yeah.
My dad's friend in Canada gets 50% of his paycheck taken away because of taxes.
Yeah. Because Canada is a socialist state.
Yeah.
They take it and they pay for your insurance and
That,
stuff.
yeah.
Like that.
The cool
Yeah.
about they made it not too bright.
Then your federal income, $100,000, you're going to be in about a 30% tax bracket. Okay. Of course, this matters whether you're single or married and so forth. Okay. And then sales tax, depending on where you live, we have pretty high sales tax in Wichita. This is why some people go out to Luber's and Cheney and buy a car, because they'll save a couple $100 of taxes by going outside the city limits. Okay. Capital gains, obviously that is on your investments, okay, which is 27%. So if you make money in the stock market, take it out, or you're flipping houses and you make money on that, you got to pay capital gains tax, okay? Property tax depends on where you live. So property taxes in Wichita city limits are lower than they are in, say, Goddard or Andover and so forth, because the suburbs jack up their property taxes to pay for what?
Water.
Electricity. That was astonishing.
Nicer schools. Okay, property taxes are a big funder of education. Okay, is that a funder? Funder?
Sponsor.
Sponsors. Donator.
It's
I
a
like
big
founder.
funding mechanism for education.
A big
We're talking bricks and mortar here, right? Okay, so like, depending on the community, if they pass what's called a school bond, they'll raise property taxes for a period of time to raise a few $1 million. They just turfed the baseball fields and softball fields over at Andover and Andover Central. Okay, and Mays and May South did that with their baseball, and Wichita did that with their football and soccer fields, right? A few years ago.
You're getting
Okay.
me too.
So that's your property taxes. We talked about that. You know about that. Medicare, that comes out of your check. Okay. So all told, Ashton just said her dad has a friend who lives in Canada, and 50% of what they make goes to government. Well, if you add this together, are you going to get to 50%?
No.
You're pretty close.
Depends on how much money you make, really. Because if this is 30%, okay, and this is 10%, and you're living in California, okay, you're almost at 40, okay, and then you throw these things in, and then you die, and then whatever you have left could get taxed at a high rate. Now, you've got to have a fairly large estate to qualify for this. Okay. So, yeah, taxes.
So like in Texas, how much higher are their sales taxes and stuff like that?
Not that much higher. They use fees and so forth. Now, and with Florida, I know a lot of it, they rely on things like hotel taxes from tourism.
Yeah.
So they rental car taxes for tourism, and this really jacks up their revenue. Texas, I'm not sure where they get all their money to fund government with no state income tax, but it's usually through other taxes, different fees and so forth for services.
Their toll taxes is really high when you're driving.
Yeah.
Is it Oregon that has like no sales tax or state income tax, but they have really high profits?
It could be that in Texas as well.
It is,
So, like,
they have a lot of land.
It's like
I feel like you just said that out of a wing.
Just the way you said that. Sorry.
so like in like New Orleans, would they like jack up the like alcohol prices during Mardi Gras and stuff like that? Is that where they make a lot of that?
You might see that, but you don't want to jack up prices
Don't
so
they make
high
it
that you
cheaper?
discourage people to go. Yeah.
Can you do that?
And there's lots of competition.
Yes. Can you just raise taxes for like a specific?
Raise prices?
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
Or like just during a specific time?
Have you been to a Major League Baseball game?
Oh my gosh.
All American.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Or go to the Shocker basketball game or something like that. How much they charge you for
I'm not
equipment?
talking for like a specific region, I'm talking like, if they were to just raise prices during Mardi Gras, is that allowed?
It's kind of like when you go to spring break and more expensive to like buy during spring break.
Hotel prices, demand.
That's why I book your flights about 7 months in advance.
Yes. Hey, it's capitalism, baby.
I never do that.
All right.
I'll give you like 2 weeks.
All right, so a couple other things that I want to touch on with that is a power of Congress. One is called copyright. You've all heard of copyright.
Yeah. It's plagiarism a big deal.
Okay, copyright. What type of things do you copyright? Music, books, movies, lyrics,
Studies and information.
Yeah, studies, like.
Drawings.
painting, sculpture, internet, music,
programs.
huh? All
TV
sorts of
shows.
stuff, right? Okay. So would you kind of refer to this as intellectual property?
Yeah.
Okay. How long does a copyright last?
15 years.
Forever. Don't have to pay for it.
Is it
Forever, your life. It lasts for your life plus
70 years.
70. Life plus 70 sounds like a prison sentence.
I have a question.
Okay. So you can pass it to your family, or your family can take it and they can sell it to somebody. Okay? Sell that copyright. Is it finally, can we sing it now, legally?
No.
Not yet?
what song?
What year was that?
Somebody told me it wasn't copyrighted.
No, for a long time it was.
What song?
What happened?
Happy birthday.
So on TV they can't.
What? Where does the patent fall?
I'm going to talk about that
On
next.
TV they. Wait, Ashley had a question.
Yes.
So like, Dr. Seuss dies, okay? So,
Yeah.
so how happens to his books in 7 years? It goes to show.
Anybody can make them and sell them.
That's not right.
They're dead.
He's dead.
They're dead plus 70. They've been 6 feet under for 70 years. All right, let it go. All right, patent. Patent. Okay.
Wait, is this?
I didn't know he was alive.
You guys remember Alex Lightning Johnson?
Yes.
Remember Alex? Alex
Yeah.
Johnson?
No.
The Johnsons, there was like 10 of them came through here.
Did Noah Johnson come through here?
Different Johnson.
Yes.
Just saw on Facebook last night past the bar. The bar, you can see
The bar,
it.
yeah.
So, what made me think of that is patent attorneys, okay, patent law. All right, so generally patents deal with things like inventions, okay, things, new inventions that you come up with. So if you're watching Shark Tank, okay, so if they come up with a new product, now patents do not last as long as copyrights. All right, because I think the main reasons why they don't last as long is because it is something that is very useful to society oftentimes. And so right now, patents usually last 20 years. So if you came up with a hula hoop, for instance, for 20 years, you would be the only person that could make hula hoops and call them hula hoops. Now, you can make it something similar to a hula hoop and call it something else, but then they might sue you for patent infringement. Okay? So there's a whole bunch of law on this. Okay? So you have lawyers galore that study patent law. Okay? Now, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, drugs that can help people. So let's say you came up with a pill that would cure any type of cancer.
I got it.
Would it be right for somebody that had that to get a patent on it and charge $50,000 per pill?
No.
That wouldn't be right, but it would be legal. I mean, this happens with some drugs that are very expensive today. Congress has tackled this, and today, patents on prescription drugs only last 7 years, not 20 years. Then the generics can come out. So any of you guys that have allergies, that take Zyrtec or Claritin or Allegra, you can buy it not only over the counter now, but you can buy the generic brand at Walgreens or Dillon's or what have you. Teresa, sorry.
Do you know if there's any actual laws in place to limit that?
That one dude got in trouble.
Yeah, there was the one dude, one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Guys, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen.
Who was that one dude?
Hey, pay attention, please.
The one dude.
God.
Guys, if you are a researcher and you're trying to find a cure to people's symptoms, health symptoms that you can fix, if you're working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks for years trying to develop something that's going to help people, do you not have the right to get wealthy off of it? Because if you don't have that right, and you put everything into the public sector, and all the doctors and all the researchers work for the government, you're still going to get that salary. Are people going to work 50, 60, 70 hours? No. You won't have the ingenuity if you can't get rich doing it. Okay? Like it or not, if you want to go into medicine, you got to go to school forever. You're going to have pay all this money to become a doctor. Okay? You got to pay off those loans. And one day, if you're like a really good surgeon or something like that, you're going to be able to really buy this really nice house in the Bahamas if you want to. But you know what you're going to do? You're going to save people's lives, and you worked for 30 years to become that. Are you not entitled to some reward? It's not a perfect world. With limitations. And that's what Congress did with the 7-year deal. Okay, they said it's wrong. Okay, now because of so much money that these pharmaceuticals companies put into the research, they have to recoup that. They don't exist as a business unless they make a profit. Okay, and I myself invest in some of these pharmaceutical companies because they do turn profits. Because we are addicted to pills in this society, okay? And so people want a pill to cure their problems. And so pharmaceuticals are trying to come up with ways to deal with your symptoms. Okay? Now, if they can cure cancer, that would be great. Okay? And if that person can come up with that and make $500 million or $1 billion, let's pay that person $1 billion and let's get that to the people that need it. Okay? We come together and we figure this out. You know what I mean? But if there's no profit motive, people are not going to put in the work to do it. And this is where society's failed. You've got to have a profit motive. People are human beings. It's not a perfect world. You'd like to think that people are going to work 80 hours a week to solve life's problems and not make anything from it. But that's not human beings. So, I think Congress did the right thing by limiting the length of time on these. And I'm sure there are people out there that would want to say they should only be able to do it for a year. Okay? Well, good luck getting new drugs. Yeah?
Can't you renew patents?
You can.
So how does that work?
I am not a patent attorney.
Do you know anything about it? Because then what's to stop the same? Because I'd assume it kind of defeats the purpose of having any sort of limitation on the patents. If the same person who got the patent in the first place can just get it again.
Yeah.
So my question was really who decides?
Okay, but like if you invent one product and over your life you lose the rights to producing that product, like what's the point of inventing it if you can't make money off of it? Like if patent only lasts 20 years.
You can still make it, but so can everybody else.
Yeah, so like I mean you just lose out.
Yeah, I know. I'm just asking who, like, do you know anything about who gets, like, who decides?
Well, there is a U.S. Patent Office.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and so we would have to do a little research about what types of products you can renew your patents on and which ones you can't. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
That's fine. I was just curious as to like how they go about making the decision as to who gets the new patent.
Yeah, but I would assume that in most cases, something that is widely used by the general public, they wouldn't allow you to hold that patent forever. You know, renew it forever. They allow other people to get into the market. Yeah.
Do you know if the patent office or whatever has any kind of ability to stop, like, sounds weird, but like patent espionage where people go in and screw up other people's stuff so they can't get the patent first?
There are people that come up with ideas that will get that idea patented but not develop the idea, which can be frustrating because you might come up with that idea later but it's already a patent but they're not even using it.
Yeah, or like when people know that they're both close to a breakthrough and so they stop another person. Because there's like Louis Prince was the actual inventor of the motion picture camera, but he disappeared before he could get his patents. Just
I'm not sure how that works. Yeah.
My grandpa used to work for Coleman, so he had a lot of patents. Like the workers could just like change something and get their own patents.
Oh, they could. They let him do that.
Yeah, and so then he went to work for a different place in Wisconsin. I forget the company, but his patent went with him, so he could apply that. And then Coleman could not use his design anymore.
Wow, that's
he
impressive.
had to get lawyers and stuff like that.
Yeah, you would have to. I would think if you were working for a company like that, most companies are going to say these are since you work for me, these are my patents, not your grandfather's.
Right.
So he was very fortunate that he was able.
And that was the 70s. Probably nowadays it would not.
Yeah, they probably have some. Well, at least the companies would regulate that. Yeah. Okay. How many of you guys have heard of eminent domain?
Not me.
Eminent domain. Okay. So, let me define this for you. The inherent right to take private property for public use. All right, K96, right? goes up to Mays, yes? Okay, they are planning on building K96, a branch of that, goes up to Hutch, right? Down to Goddard. Which means people from Goddard can go around the north side rather than Kellogg, right? Which will relieve traffic some, hopefully, on Kellogg. That is going to go through people's property. If you're going to build a highway through people's property, the government has the authority through eminent domain to buy that property from you at fair market value. Okay? You may not want to sell your property, or you may not want to cut your farm in half, but they have the power to do that. Now, generally, most people think of eminent domain when it comes to highways and railroads, or sometimes if you're going to build an arena downtown, or you're going to build a new gym at North High where the softball and baseball fields are, and you're hoping to buy up the houses next to the school so that you can build the softball and baseball fields where those houses are. But there were people that lived in those houses that didn't want to sell their houses. Can the government force you to?
That's horrible.
It's horrible. In 2005, I think it was 2005.
2025.
I'm pretty sure it's 2005. Kilo versus City of New London. Oh boy. I believe it is in Connecticut. All right, guys. This one is something that's going to take us a while to get through, and I think we have 3 minutes. So write Kilo down, and then tomorrow,
Monday,
we will discuss that. I feel a little foggy this morning. I apologize if I was foggy. No, I think it had more to do with you being disruptive than anything else.
It's called participation.
Yes, with one another. Have a good weekend.
Like,
comment.